So let's just say that the work is a fundamental of life, but what it gives you is this. Like, look where we are now. I wouldn't have met you if it wasn't through quote unquote work. It brings people of all different shapes, sizes, skills, interests together into a place. So for me, I've always loved what work gives you, that higher purpose. And not only that, you do have the distinct advantage of being able to get money and pay your bills, which then leads to more things, experiences, etc.
Welcome to Workplus, the podcast that shines a light on the people doing good work across Northern Ireland. I'm your host, Richard Kirk, founder of Workplus. I've spent years working with employers, schools, colleges and universities, helping young people and career changers to make better informed career decisions. Each week, I sit down with real people doing real jobs to explore how they got there, what they've learned, and why their work matters. If you're a parent, teacher, carer, or just curious about what good work looks like today, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Neil, it's so great to have you on podcast today. How are you keeping?
I'm keeping great, thanks.
Good.
How you doing?
Good. Yeah, I'm doing well. Looking forward to this one for a while. So you started your role at Software NI October of 2024 or so, yeah. And there was an article I read about you where you said you wanted computer science to be as normal as maths in school. So tell us a bit about where did that come from? You know?
Oh, good question. I suppose for us, like at Software NI, what we're trying to do is accelerate the software industry, and software industry in NI is pretty good already, right? It would be seen as a success. But whenever you're trying to grow something like an industry, there's an awful lot of component parts that go into it. One of which is skills. And so what we've tried to do is break down those sort of component parts in the industry and try to understand how people might get more into computer science, software development, with a view to that then making its way into the industry. So I suppose you look at the data and you'll see that quite a few more people will study maths and English and your core subjects versus software development. So that's probably where a statement like that came from, amongst a lot of others in the bustle of starting a new job and so on.
So right now it isn't as common as maths, but you're saying it should be. Like, what do you think is the biggest blocker for schools to embracing that, as to make it as common as doing maths?
Yeah. Well, obviously in the last couple of years, the notion of software and even the concept of being able to design and build it has, I guess, spread out through all sorts of different ways, not least the good old AI. So it's not what it was maybe a couple of years ago, but what we have now is an opportunity. And I suppose for us, if you say to yourself, right, we all got different learning styles, and some people are into some things and some people are into other things. Computer science would have typically, I think, been seen as something for the quote unquote the geeks. But over time and as an industry grows in a locality and an ecosystem forms, conceptions and misconceptions sort of get shattered. And so it's a lot more easy now to build software because of AI, and we're having conversations every day. And even since October, my perception and the industry's perception and those in software and AI have shifted massively as we've seen the rapid acceleration of software and technology. So
the industry's grappling with it, which is great. How can schools start to get in on that as well? If you're saying that it's easier than ever to spin something up. Maybe there's still a lot of things to consider around cybersecurity and data management and all of that. But to spin something up is a lot easier. How can software and I help schools catch that vision? You know?
So the bit I outlined there was the sort of the context. In schools itself, there's about 190 post-primary schools in NI. It's quite a small number, but there's obviously thousands of kids going through there. We have got a strong education system, which is just in the midst of a review. Again, two things can be true at once. Something can be very good, but there's room for growth, potential improvement, and so on, just like the industry. Only 1 in 4 of our post-primary schools has a sort of dedicated software teacher.
Okay.
And that's a blocker. You referenced blockers earlier. So it's becoming more and more easy to build, certainly proof of concept, and certainly in time, the trajectory looks like from start to finish. Software projects could be done for a lot of people at a sort of a lower local level. The question mark will be over the maintainability of software and that sort of notion of production grade and whether it can be serviced. I think there's a lot of people would suggest that that's going to be unlikely, certainly in the near term, but not impossible. So when you ask, okay, how do you encourage kids on the basis that only 1 in 4 schools has a sort of dedicated software teacher, and therefore I guess less kids are going to be studying in 3/4 of the schools that don't, like software related courses and so on. The best way you can do it is to help kids to understand and start to build. And that's really where
Mm.
Software and I comes into its own. There's a number of great organizations that have been doing things for a number of years in schools. Software companies themselves have been going out and trying to inspire the next generation. But for us at Software and I, what we're trying to do is we're looking at system change. We're trying to make the great example in one school the norm across all, say, 190. And that's before you even get to talk to primary schools as well. So in the most recent review, a lot of my work, by the way, is centered on policy change. So it's not necessarily the most attractive, but that's how we're approaching this. If you can shift and optimize policies, the outworkings of that are that things are more aligned, and then you help to accelerate the industry. So and this is just one part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And you know this better than anyone, Richard, the sort of skills landscape, and you probably dine out on this type of stuff maybe more more than others. That's something we do share a passion for. But you know, for us, it's really about saying what might a curriculum entail? What space could you get on the curriculum on a weekly basis to allow kids to experiment? There's a great example in Belfast, St Malachy's Digital Hub has kind of been at the forefront of this notion of trying to encourage kids to develop and grow and build. And then other schools go to that hub. I think there's maybe up to 10 in sort of North Belfast area. And then what's happened is that other schools have seen that. So that's your kind of your frontier organization in the same way we've got builders in AI. St. Malachy's are that in the sort of school world. So what we're trying to do at that system level is say, well, how do you create a hub for all schools to be able to go to, or how can you potentially match every school to a software company? There's only 190. We've got far more than 190 software companies. Yes, they're different sizes, but immediately, if you were to then create that match, you're able to create space on the curriculum on a weekly basis, even if that's an hour or two. Teams from these companies could go in and start showing and encouraging kids to build. And remember, 2-3 years ago, we didn't have the tools as easily available, but now we can come in and use various tools, your Lovables, and all sorts of others to be able to say, right, here's how you can create an idea, something kind of out of nothing.
Yeah.
So that's the spirit of it. And then what we're doing in Software and I is looking right across the continuum. So you've got in the schools, you've got the skills system itself. So that's outside of school, but further higher education right the way through mid-career. Then when you've started and built a company, a big thing is around increasing your sales and being able to scale that. But then, of course, there's a bigger picture around the already successful industry. How do you ensure that we surf that wave for the waves of change going forward? So there's an awful lot of moving parts, but the seeds of this are about inspiring kids. It's always going to come back to that notion of how do you create the framework, and within that, then the magic sort of happens.
Yeah. And so you talk about at all levels there, you're talking about trying to get the policy right and the structure right around curriculum and careers and things like that. But then you're talking about real practical examples. You mentioned the St Malachy's Digital Hub. That's been going for a couple of years now. Are there any other ways that Software and I is engaging with schools to try and support those teachers that maybe don't feel confident and hear the word software and have all these misconceptions?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
So one thing we've done is we've set up industry insights days. So we've got teachers come in and learn what it's actually like to work in the industry. They get equipped with some of the tools that are used, that can be used in terms of lessons. And again, one of the things we would see from a lot of employers, they don't necessarily want kids coming through with the highest levels of technical ability. Software in the industries, I guess it's somewhat misconceived. Back to what I said earlier, it's not all coding, even for the the most hardcore of coders and those sort of A+ engineers. A lot of it is that diagnosing of the problem and using processes to unearth the way forward. Design is a huge part. Project management. Once you then build something, you gotta test, debug, maintain. There's a huge software development sort of life cycle that's ongoing. And many different people of different skill sets are within the industry or what's known as a software industry. So What we've done is very practical things where we're constantly bringing teachers in. We've also set up sort of mentor scheme, pilot year where we matched around about 50 teachers with 50 people from industry, again, so that they
Mhm.
can ask questions. That's really good, but you still have those 3/4 of schools without those dedicated teachers.
Mhm.
So that's our real aim. We want to help the teachers that are there, but if we can't secure new teachers in those schools, which it's unlikely we will, just given the constraints in the education system and so on, the best way to approach it is, well, industry steps forward. And I think
Mhm.
industry sees that as an investment. It's good for kids to be able to acquire the traits and the skills and that knowledge, but also to know that regardless of anything, you as a kid now, as you could years ago, but it's easier. You can go home after school, log on if you're fortunate enough to to have a computer and an internet connection and start building. That's what we want to encourage en masse. The more people that do that have the confidence to do that, that then will transmit right the way through. I guess your own personal experience and then through the industry. That's our
Yeah.
thesis anyway.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, I can see how that could work really well. And you mentioned about government and legislation and changes. If there was one lever that you could pull that would have the biggest impact on achieving all of that, what would it be?
I don't think there is one. I think there's a number across the continuum, and that's the reason we've set up ourselves the way we have at Software and I. We have a mission to obviously accelerate the industry, and we want to try and double it inside a decade. Um, but too many parts will impact the industry.
Mm.
So for us, if there was one lever, I think we're actually pretty close. We have action plans that we've the priority sectors of which software
These are
is one.
government action plans. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
your government has taken and said this is
Mm.
successful, but we want to make it better. There's huge investments around the AICC through our main institutions, universities. There's probably a constriction or a blockage, I would say, in the skills system. So schools I've outlined, there's a big constriction there around funding and that university conundrum and the Mazen cap, the number of students that are allowed to sort of study here and how that's paid for. If you can increase the number of people who are interested in schools, you got to widen the pipeline through the university and that could be through the standard university or, of course, through apprenticeships
Mhm.
and academies. So I would say if you had to put me on the spot, massively increase the number of learning opportunities beyond school for people, be that university, be that apprenticeships or academies for those people that don't actually need to go through a standard model. And the
Mm.
reason I actually say that is because every year, well, for a number of years, you could say that almost all knowledge, human knowledge, has been available online for free. If you've got that access to internet, you can pretty much learn anything. Your ability to do that now is getting easier and easier and easier. People are talking about how teachers are being assisted. Various countries around the world are giving, say, ChatGPT or another system to their whole, I guess, education system. Estonia is one example. I think it rolls out from September this year.
Mhm.
Everyone's got a subscription, a premium subscription now. So you can pretty much do anything. If you don't understand something the first way, you can have it explained to you 5, 10, 15 different ways until you get it.
Mhm.
That notion of learning to learn is key. So the reason I say that is because more and more examples has been unearthed by people in the industry who didn't necessarily go the standard route.
Yeah.
They learned the code from age 11 or 12. And I think you got to recognize that all of these different channels are important. And we think of the hose analogy, the wire to the hose, and the more water is flowing through in each of those channels, the more likely you're going to get people who are equipped to be able to build. And then
Mm.
that helps
Yeah.
the industry, it
Yeah.
helps them. So
Do you think employers are open to those alternative pathways, or are they still hooked on the graduate market?
yeah, I think they are, but there's again a bit of nuance. So if you're great and you didn't go through uni, the challenge becomes connecting to an employer and being able to sell yourself. It becomes a different challenge. Whereas if you are great but you don't necessarily have technical ability or you're not ready to go into a company, your challenge is then to learn something and then being able to package that.
Mhm.
So we would see a number of the large employers here who have, of course, benefited from the wonderful pipelines through our unis, right? They've been really successful. It's really hard for a uni to keep up curriculum wise. That's a
Mm.
challenge, and we're ongoing conversations around that. One of the benefits of not going through a curriculum is that you can build and learn on the job, and that's one thing I hear employers say a lot. For example, an apprentice really benefits because they go in from day one and they start to learn and build projects. Um, and the sweet spot is learning enough theory and obviously putting it into practice. And that's why even university students on year 3 are encouraged, if possible, to go out on placement,
Mm.
because you come back after your third year, you're a different person. So I would say that employers are becoming more and more open to it, but it may come to a point where we got to help more students again build earlier, do projects, and then sell those projects. Be able to come into a room, I guess, like this, unpack
Yeah.
what the challenge was, what they've done, where they ran into problems, how they got through that. I think if you can do that, and whether you have a degree or not, and you've got a base level of technical ability, enthusiasm, the motivation,
Mm-hmm.
you can listen, learn to learn. Those traits are pretty much going to get you to the point where an employer says, yes, okay. There's obviously anomalies everywhere.
Yeah, and that's not a those aren't technical traits either. Those are things that you can
No,
develop in lots of different ways.
exactly.
Yeah.
Clearly, a technical ability is
Yeah.
key. But again, that's kind of arguably that's getting, how do I put it? You're getting more assistance now from the tools that are available to be, not to be less technical per se, but to be able to enter an organization and get help,
Yeah.
and smooth that runway. The learning curve might be less sort of steep because you've got AI tools.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, again, there's nuance in everything. What you don't want is people coming in and just only being able to use AI, knowing what's under the hood and the bonnet is,
As
of
you
course,
say, to go to full production, it still needs.
it's different. But as if you look at the trajectory, the curve suggests that it's going to get easier and easier.
I was reading last week 2 reports that were they were talking about, since the advent of widespread use of ChatGPT and AI, say 18 months to 24 months ago, there's been a decline in the number of entry level opportunities.
Yeah.
This is across the whole economy. It's
Yeah.
not just in software. Do you have any reflections on that?
Yeah. Well, I think there's two things going on. In the world, there's huge uncertainty. There's an awful lot of sort of vectors at play here. Political uncertainty. And I mean, it's been pretty severe when you think about what we've gone through, even let's say the last 5 years.
Mm.
Your pandemic, conflict, ups and downs in the economy. And then I think every time there's a US election, there is a bit of a hold and a pullback in general, but this has been more acute. Then when you factor in AI on that, where companies are experiencing on one side, perhaps contracts that aren't then given or investments aren't made because people are holding, or there's a redeployment of cash elsewhere, that has huge ripple effects depending on whether you're buying or selling. And I think those things combined, probably with a lot more, has meant that graduates and certain other roles are the first to suffer, because people look to see what they can make with what they have. And then also, in this case, potentially look to AI and go, right, where might the efficiencies or opportunities be? Now, our theory at this time, and it's evolving, is that long term, the industry has a bright future, but there's turbulence here. There's a period of those companies understanding the trajectory and the speed of AI and those tools. This is the year, a so-called year of sort of agentic. And if you're able to automate, let's just say, tasks for an extended period of time without human intervention, that looks to be a real sort of golden nugget, whereby you can have agents potentially do the roles of others, and those others, at least in conversation, appear to be seen as junior roles, which tend to then be, of course, graduate roles.
Mm.
So that's where I think there's a pullback, perhaps a shedding, but it may be that we need to just look at how that flows through in the next couple of years. That's our theory. That may be ignorant, naive. I don't know if anyone knows, but people and other roles are going to unfold, and they are unfolding already. So again, if you go back to those essential traits, learning to learn, understanding where this is going, even if you're a computer science student, or a software development student now in year 1, year 2, you're still massively ahead of much of the population. Far more software is being built. Far more software is going to be built now than would have been a number of years ago. So you are at a massive advantage there. If you can then combine your let's call it junior level skills, but potentially and accelerate that with the AI tools, you're way ahead of the sort of the average Joe, as it were, in the population, and we would see that as a huge advantage, huge advantage still of going to study software, taking on a software apprenticeship or academies and so on.
Yeah, yeah.
That's some reflections.
There's a lot there, and
Yeah.
but you talked earlier just about the importance of having the structures right, and your background is policy. Do you get a sense that our government here has an AI policy or strategy that they know how to handle this? And I don't know, there's a lot of private companies that are shaping it,
Sure.
but as a society, do you get a sense that our government is leading us well in this space?
I think I got to take a step back again because I view all this stuff in context. So um, when you look at the frontier of AI, it's not here in NI, but again, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing, right? So you've got your big sort of US companies, China, potentially some in labs in Europe, and then the UK overall, let's say, has a really strong wave and emerging sort of network of labs. We've got phenomenal universities and cutting edge companies that have been doing things for years. So from a UK government perspective, I would be really encouraged by what the government's done. It's put a lot of eggs in a basket there around technology, AI being at the center of that, with its then 8 priority sectors that have just been released alongside the industrial strategy, and then there's a trade strategy as well. So the cash really and the ability to spend and invest is with the UK government. Here in NI, we have those constraints. We have constraints that don't allow us to do the basics around water and sewage infrastructure and various other things. So then when it comes to AI and AI investment, there have been really good nuggets. I've mentioned AICC. Universities have been able to get large investments and grants. I know there's a conversation and I want at the moment around compute, but we're constrained when it comes to, say, our electricity grid. Data centers have been seen as something that could potentially be valuable. They are to a certain extent. They're hungry on the power network, and they can create maybe a cluster effect around them. There's some jobs to be had there. But when it looks to AI and AI policy, where we would look at the minute is to the executive office, and we have the chief scientific and technology advisor, Helen McCarthy. She's done a phenomenal job, I think, of, I guess, exposing the need to focus on data in government and get those basics right across the silos. She's pushing hard and has got a lot of progress and buy-in, from what it seems on the outside anyway, around the need to get your structures right. And there will be some investment. The Office of AI and Digital then was agreed by the executive. That was something we had pushed for. We think there's got to be at least some figurehead within government to drive that. It's quite focused on public sector, and there's huge gains to be had there. There perhaps is an area to develop out the private sector strategy, and at the time of recording here, I do believe there's a push then, once a person's appointed to run the Office of AI and Digital, you should see a sort of a flow through. But that all said, industry doesn't necessarily need or should wait for government. I think it's important to work together. And our companies here, we would be encouraging to get a big piece of the pie around UK government contract opportunities to develop themselves and put their services out there, because at the global level, we've got some phenomenal companies here doing incredible work. It's important to try and integrate AI into your existing product line, and then try to hopefully help people spin out of our universities on AI first companies. And I suppose that's a bit I'd finish on. Despite or in spite of government policy, you might suggest that it's a little slow, it's difficult to keep up with, but we again come back to that building, encouraging people to build AI first companies now is something that you can do regardless of policy.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned earlier about one of the aspects of software and I is sales. And so this is helping to sort of overcome those myths that to be in the software sector, you need to be someone who's really technical and just like writing lines of code. So why has there been like a particular, so you mentioned there about selling ourselves to the world. So, for those who are listening thinking, Actually, I quite I like convincing people of value. I
Yeah.
like persuading people. Like,
Yeah.
is there a need for more people to be selling software?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is. So there's some phenomenal companies here who have started in NI and are selling globally, right? I'll probably leave some out here, but let's say two of our members, Software Now, First Derivatives, and then Options Technology, for example. So um, I've heard a number of anecdotes where if you start a company here and you've got someone from NI who knows the place, the company is passionate about home, and you sell around the world, the likelihood is that you're going to find it easier or have a better chance because it's in you. It's something that you can't really put a price on. Our view would be that we've done a phenomenal job at building up our software engineering capacity, but we've a really good opportunity to build up our sales and the sales professional capacity. And it's overlooked, it's not discussed. And we've come across this notion partly from feedback from members. If you go to the US or perhaps other places, sales is seen as a phenomenal career. It's well paid, it's prestigious, and the Americans are really good at it. We think there's an opportunity here. It's not that we're not good at it. Again, two things true at once. We're doing well, but we could really accelerate our products and our service companies further around the world. Obviously, working with the likes of InvestNI, Department of Business and Trade, and so on. So our focus is to say, okay, you need to help the company sell more. And that's things like trade missions and certain incentives within the system. But actually, what you need to do is help more people, again, coming through school, maybe have gone through even a technical degree, who think, okay, I've got a base level understanding, a solid technical understanding, but I actually might be better selling this now. And having both of those parts is a real win when it comes to being client side and client facing. So that's what we're starting. We have a meeting actually just this week around a sales academy. Could you start a software sales academy and then encourage the next generation not only to get into the software industry, but actually say, well, here's a role. And by the way, selling is one of those. People, as you've mentioned there, Richard, are pretty good at it naturally.
Mhm.
So why not harness that? And again, you've got the distinct advantage. If you go from here out to somewhere else in the world,
Mhm.
people
Yeah.
people should love you anyway. You're from the island of Ireland after all. So
Yeah, it's. I think what you described it there about US, it's seen as a prestigious career, and why wouldn't that be something that we would aspire or to have our young people interested in? Showing people who don't see the value in something, to show them this, that there's value in this, that there's something that they can benefit from. Like,
yeah,
whenever we're all being sold to, that's the message that we're being given, that
yeah.
there's something that you're struggling with, you're challenged with. Here's something that can solve that problem for you. Or it could
Yeah,
be this accelerant or this benefit for you.
exactly. And that's that intuition. Not everyone has. You can learn it, but also selling is inherently like a human thing, and it's face to face and it's building connections. So I definitely think after all the talk of AI, this human connection and the ability to sell and build relationships is going to become even more precious.
Hmm.
That'd be my own view at this time. I know you can always get the upsell, but it's rare that you would get, at least at this stage, to companies, or you would, do business without at least some sort of human in the loop.
Hmm.
And I think you hear so many anecdotes over the years of the deal was done here. It was something innocuous. We went and did X or did Y. And at the end of, said activity, we said, oh, well, we do business together. And it was based on the relationship, perhaps not even on the level of technology. There was an inherent level of trust there.
Mhm.
And I think that's the thing that people perhaps are even nervous about around all things AI and development. There's a ability to gain a sense of trust when you look someone in the eye
Yeah.
and form that. So yeah, I think there's a really good opportunity for our people here to see that it's not all technology. The human connection is
Mhm.
is really still there, and again could become more and more precious.
Good, good.
So
So you're, imagine you're chatting with a friend whose son or daughter are 16 or 17 thinking about leaving school, and they say, Neil, why would they join the software sector?
mm,
What would your answer over a coffee or whatever
yeah.
to them be? What would you say to them?
Well, I'd probably start by looking at their sort of fundamentals, I always start with, well, what are you naturally drawn to, or have you been drawn to in your life? And if something was unearthed there, I could draw the connection pretty quickly to the industry and say, well, if you're into that, turns out this is a big need in industry. So rather than inverting it the other way, I think there's just so many opportunities, whether you want to be based here, you want to travel, you want to design, sell, project manage, you use an awful lot of roles. And software, as we talked about earlier, is only becoming more prevalent. So I don't think it's a hard sell at all. There's a need for people in the industry. I probably would also say, after establishing what people are drawn to or interested in, and it's okay, obviously, to not know, but they might have some inherent traits that you can spot through a conversation at a coffee. I think in any industry, in any role, you have to be able to kind of set out who you are, and ideally, as soon as possible, know who and what you are. And there's a real strength in knowing even your limitations or what you like and don't like. I think going through the system myself, I probably had a bit of a fear of revealing who I really was to an employer, because you sort of get intimidated by the professional landscape, and you want to just be a person that says, whatever the problem and the challenge, I can solve it. Now, as it happens, that's a good a good attitude to have as well, and that's what an employer generally would like. But I think there's one thing doing a job for the cash, and one thing finding your sort of calling in life. And again, it comes back to listening to your gut and your intuition. So I would say the opportunities are there in the industry. It's about knowing who you are as a kid, and then once you know, there's an endless number of routes to be able to get into that.
Yeah.
And that's something we got to improve, and that's something I guess I know you're working on.
Yeah, let's go there next. You talk about those different routes. So we're working together on a project which is funded by the Department for the Economy called Software for All, which was a phrase that you came up with. So thank you for your creative input and leading on this. So those routes then, so the Software for All project that we're running is about apprenticeships. It's about creating that market and more abundance in that market, where we have more employers hiring more apprentices and encouraging more females to become apprentices in software, cyber, and fintech. So what excites you most about the potential of this project?
So, well, I should say where Software for All came from. It actually the interview for the role is I created a campaign idea, which was Software for All, and it was because I had this notion that the software industry here was great, but that there was a perception of misunderstanding from the outside. So this notion that actually it's for everyone in NI. It's one of our flagship industries, and it it's the golden thread of your cyber, fintech, regtech. That's software in its widest sense. So in other countries where they have a sort of a national industry, it becomes a source of pride, and it's for everyone to be proud of and have a piece of. So that's where the notion of Software for All came from. It was also inherently aware that I think 1 in 5 employees in the industry is female, and so that's clearly low, and we have that problem still across other sectors and other elements of our society. But within the industry, there are phenomenal women there within that 1 in 5. So I think for us, as we've developed this concept, and we go back to the sort of thesis of accelerating industry, where are the blocks? Well, one of the blocks is that we can't get enough people into the industry. And from a woman's perspective, childcare has been a huge thing. I worked on previous roles. You look at the blocks, and if an industry is misunderstood and is potentially inaccessible to a cohort of the population, well, then you got to center your attention on it. So for us, really, our target is, well, it's in the next 18 months, get 40 additional software apprentices who are women amongst your wider campaigns, and then tell the stories and highlight those of the women that are there. There's been great initiatives over the years doing this. It's not like this is just a wow idea, but we are the first to specifically get funding and focus our attention on that creation of the roles. It's one thing making people aware, but then making it even easier to get in through a dedicated pathway. That's the bit that's really exciting, and that's the bit that will change the game. And once those 40 come in, you've got then 40 ambassadors who will help the next 40 or 80 or whatever it may be. So
Yeah, that's great. That's great. It's great to hear you summarize it like that as well. And we're excited about this. We've seen apprenticeships really break down barriers, if even from a stage of life point of view. We've had men and women in their 30s and 40s who have become apprentices because if an employer had only said you need to have a bachelor's or a master's degree to be considered,
yeah,
they would have to have dropped out of their job. They would have, maybe with a family
Yeah.
and had to go to university full time or part time over a 3 to 6 year period with the hope of then getting a job.
Yeah.
Whereas with an apprenticeship, because the employer changed their mindset, the employer said, no, actually come as you are.
Yeah.
Come with all your life experience that you've gained as a 35-year-old mum of two or a 42-year-old dad or whatever, and bring that, and with your ambition, and we will develop you in parallel, that sort of 4 days in work, 1 day at college or uni approach. And so, and again, that's helpful to unlock the barrier around helping women to participate in it as well. But it's also just a great way of people who don't have the qualifications yet to do that. So on lots of levels, we're really excited about this project.
Well, exactly.
Too,
And it's going back to that. Imagine a time where I think the terms used is like lifelong learning. I'm not necessarily a fan of that term because I don't necessarily think people know what it means, unless you really think about it, maybe. But imagine you just are at any point in your life, young, old, and you just know what to do or where to go if you want to do something. Like it's helped us. Technology and the internet has accelerated that, and that ability to get knowledge for free at the sort of tip of your fingers. But in NI, for such a sort of small, compact place that does sort of punch above its weight, our systems aren't aligned and people don't necessarily know where to go and when. So you got to have a way in which you are 30 or 40 or whatever age, and you can quite literally go, well, I'm going to broadly keep my family structure. I'm going to broadly keep an income because that's what I need, the basics of the Maslow hierarchy of needs. But I can still go and study in a way that suits me. So for some, it'll be the part-time degree or master's. For some, it may be the ability to go back and actually say, okay, well, I can leave my job and now get into apprenticeship because I get that income secured. Like it sounds so simple, and it actually is. When you think about the reasons this stuff doesn't happen, it's possibly to do with funding or just a legacy sort of mishmash of things over a number of years. But it's not complicated. It's the ability to acquire skills. And the factors when you acquire skills really are time, cost, and quality. It just so happens we call it an apprenticeship or a degree, but it's actually, that's really what it is, so.
For those, and the reason we have apprenticeships is because we've got employers that have caught the vision around apprenticeships.
Yeah.
But yet, in our economy as a whole, there are less than 10% of employers that are currently hiring apprentices.
Yeah.
But 4 times that say that they would like to. So there seems to be this gap between what's actually happening now and what the future could look like. From a software perspective, what do you think are some of the barriers that employers have to not maybe engaging around apprenticeships?
There'll be a range. The data that we've looked at would suggest that partly it's the awareness and understanding that it exists. Partly it'll be to do with like the costs, right? And knowing what it actually plays out as. Because I actually we're writing a letter to a government minister at the minute, and I put a comment in the draft to myself, but to everyone reading it, saying, what's the average placement salary now? And I would know where to find the apprenticeship wage, but I wouldn't necessarily know on the top of my head, it's say 15 or 20 or 25K cost to the employer, whatever it may be. And I dare say if you went out right across the economy, never mind just software companies, a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know. You'll know the concept of the apprenticeship broadly, I'd say, because that's been sort of the guild and the thing for years. But those types of apprenticeships have far moved on. And I think in an industry like software, there's probably a high enough understanding of the fact that you can do a software apprenticeship now, but the nuts and bolts of that wouldn't be widely understood. So I think those are 2 factors. Then the system and the accessibility itself, and that's the reason obviously Workplus has started, because you spotted a gap and knowing where to go. I always use the example of like 118, 118. I know we had the yellow pages, but for me, there was a period of time when 118, 118 just stood out as if you needed a number. Like, so the 118 for apprenticeships, or
Mhm.
in Newcastle, for example, and as you would draw the parallel around, when everybody in school broadly knows if you're going to that level and you're applying to uni, it's UCAS. It's just so well known. So you got to have ideally one place, one platform, or a way in that's
Mhm.
easy, minimal friction, in addition to those other awareness raising tools.
Yeah.
Then I think from an employer's perspective, you got to take a punt. Now, I think of apprenticeships as sometimes, it's not always, because I've got an example where someone says on day one, apprenticeships add value. So let's say their curve, or if return on investment is important,
Mhm.
is like that. Um, and I was surprised this person said the reason that they add value is because they ask questions that we wouldn't have thought of. So they trigger us into thinking about things in a new, fresh
Yeah.
way. Thought that was so good. Other employers will say, well, no, it might be more like this. But then when it starts to hit, it accelerates. And that apprentice is fantastic. So an anecdote that I hear a lot from different employers who don't necessarily know each other or in the same rooms is that they'll say that after 18 months, the apprentice will be quote unquote as good as or equal to, or if not better than the person that's gone through a degree without a placement. So a 3-year
Mhm.
degree in theory, 18 months, of an apprentice. Now, in those 18 months, you gotta make a payment, you gotta train, you gotta do things. But the data all suggests that you get back something far surpassed. Otherwise, you've taken a chance on someone, and
Mhm.
they have invariably again asked those questions, those beautiful questions that we all have through naivety, ignorance, and not knowing and understanding
Yeah.
things. That's all net benefit that you don't probably get in the return on investment work or surveys or monetary type
Yeah. Yeah.
qualitative pieces of
Yeah,
work that
because
you've seen,
you'd often think of like
right?
a return on investment being, oh, they shipped X code or
Yeah,
they did this project, which we then made
yeah,
a profit from. But
yeah.
yeah, your point is that they just were a good listener and asked a great question. Now,
Uh,
there's a lot that goes into preparing someone to be in the right frame of mind to ask that question, but
yeah,
that's incredible to hear that
yeah.
that's the case.
Even me coming into the industry, I had a distinct benefit coming into this job in October because I wasn't necessarily coming straight from a software company. So I was able to look at things in a way that I think, and other people told me, added value because I was
Mm.
questioning the normal way of looking at it. I've got 3 board members, new board members who are joining in August here in Software and and I know they're going to ask questions that will hopefully be challenging and uncomfortable because they'll just have a completely different way of looking at it other than us incumbents.
Yeah,
And it's the same for an apprentice. If you have an apprentice versus someone that's even been in the industry for years, you're going to get distinct advantages. So
yeah.
that's what's beautiful about it.
Great, great.
Yeah.
Well, think even like jump back to Stephen, your own career journey. You were in policy role with the
Yeah.
Federation of Small Businesses, isn't that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. FSB.
Um, yeah. Like, do you just look back on your career and think, what? How did I get here? Or
Yeah.
was there a plan around that? Like as someone who was thinking of leaving school, going, I'd love to do these things. Or
Yeah.
how did it all work
S-
out for you?
So in school, I was pretty. I did pretty well up to GCSE. Um, but then, if I'm honest, I started. I had some friends who were great people, but they were involved in some stuff you probably wouldn't want to have been.
Oh,
So I had a set of friends who would have been sort of book smart and did very well on all metrics, and then I had friends sort of outside of school, partly in who
yeah.
I was starting to get dragged left and right. So I actually got suspended in school in 5th year for a thing, wrong place, wrong time. And at that stage, I was really into languages, Spanish and business and so on. Very, very good at Spanish, A star. And that was because I had a teacher who was wonderful. He unfortunately left. He wasn't well. And then when he left, that was the kind of last draw I had in school. I
Mm.
wanted to leave and go into work. But thanks to my dad and mum, they were pretty supportive of me going through the A level and then trying to get to uni because I don't think they had gone,
Yeah.
or they had. It was more of a sort of a college type
Yeah. Yeah.
rather than uni. So I found my way in, but I was Mr. sort of business and commercial, and got a degree with a placement year. And on that third year, that's when I really thought, right, I'm gonna get into business. They kept me on through my final year, but in that time, I actually, this is completely unrelated to work, but very related when you look back and draw the pieces. I tore my ACL, my
Oh.
left knee. I was big into sport, and that was a big part of my life and my identity. And it was a really bad injury for me at that time,
Mhm.
really hard to get over. And to be honest, that probably, I joke about this, but it's probably true. I had my kind of midlife crisis at age 19 or 20, as it were. And that was when I took a sort of a very windy journey, which has always had threads around, I think, trying to make a difference and helping. I went into like a human rights based charitable company, worked with young people in care in the justice system, using a sort of a commercial mindset to build relationships, ironically, with employers and change policy and get young people into jobs within big health trusts and through the likes of social contracts or social clauses in government contracts, that sort of thing. I was always really passionate about technology, though, since my placement year, because that was basically technology transformation and consulting. So I took that passion, and I was also really passionate about photography as well from around that time.
Mhm.
When I did my knee, I was given a camera. So just one thing in, one thing out,
Yeah,
and that's the
yeah.
lesson of life that you realize, but at the time you don't know. So it all makes sense when you look back. Then left a role and worked full time trying to make it as a photographer for close to 2 years. Traveled the world, and then came back, and I got the old tap on the shoulder. It was like, right, right, what do you do with your life now? In some ways, I had a great sort of quote unquote career there, but I never saw it as a career. I saw it as life as one. I've always been really personally invested in whatever I'm doing. And it's never just been to pay the bills. That's not really, I don't think that's in me at all. I'm kind of all in. Um, so got a job then in the FSB. And the reason I was able to get that job in policy was because I'd gone onto a board through a brilliant program called the Boardroom Apprentice, which I think a lot of people have been on now. I went through like the first test cohort with Eileen Mullen, who's absolute legend, has done phenomenal work to get people on the boards here and now in England as well. Um, so I went on to a board, AGNI, and they had retail stores in the sort of social enterprise, and they sold insurance products and so on. And then I became chair of that board. So I got a real insight into P&L, what running stores looked like. And then the FSB obviously represents small businesses. I'd also been self-employed. So these weird mishmash of experiences that you could never have designed came together. And then I was able to, I guess, empathize with the small business owner. But through my previous role in the human rights sort of campaigning side, I got to know how to work with politicians, how to understand legislation and look at those blocks and go, right, here's where we need to focus our attention
Mm.
to smooth the system. Before you know it, you're 6 years there, through Brexit, through COVID, working on every issue that impacts a small business, meeting with officials here, England, EU people, you name it. Really, really interesting. And you back to the conversation with the 16-year-old. You don't set out to get those experiences, but you become more able to understand how to navigate a situation that are new, they're fresh. You have a template and a framework, mental models that you deploy to be able to make sense and then build from there. So then when the opportunity software and I came up, that passion for technology, just obsession actually. I had some relatives that lived in Silicon Valley and worked there for years. So I've always had it in me. It was just too good an opportunity not to try and go for. So yeah.
Well, it's great. And as a micro business
Yeah, yeah.
software company, a member of Software, and I'm very grateful that you're in that role now, Neil,
No, I
and
appreciate
great to
it.
see the work you're doing. As we wrap up today, it's got a very simple question.
Yeah.
What's so good about work?
Oh, well, I think what I've just unpacked there, work, right? When you think sort of philosophically about work, right? It's in some ways it is ultimately to pay the bills. Otherwise, if there was no payment, we had everything. You would be probably doing activity, but it would be in essence volunteering, right? Um, so let's just say that the work is a fundamental of life, but what it gives you is this. Like, look where we are now. I wouldn't have met you if it wasn't through quote unquote work.
Mm,
Even
yeah.
though we might have, there's connections with people outside of work. It brings people of all different shapes, sizes, skills, interests together into a place. There's very few things do that. Perhaps football teams or interests. Uh, People go to church and faith. There's various settings, but humans are inherently, want to be connected, even if you like your alone time. So for me, I've always loved what work gives you, that higher purpose, and not only that, you do have the distinct advantage of being able to get money and pay your bills, which then leads to more things, experiences, etc., etc. So, so I don't know. I think the future of work's questioned. Whether we'll be working in 10, 15, 20 years, whether we'll be working but not for cash because we will have reached AGI and so on. That is feasible. But I think for me, I've had really, really good experiences looking back on and being in situations that I just would never have got into had I guess not had a job. And I should say, not everyone has the good fortune to have a job who maybe wants one. But it doesn't mean that your life can't obviously mean something. You can still get a lot out once you say retire. You can still deploy the things you've learnt through work. It's not all about work, and you shouldn't be judged on what job you do. I'm very distinct about that. But as a vehicle, it's hard to beat.
Yeah. Well, it's great to see that you're in a place where you working with an industry and with a government and politicians that can create more opportunities for more people who do want to work to get into jobs that they never thought existed, and they can probably do things with their lives that they didn't think were quite possible. So all power to you for that. Wish you every success as you go forward on that.
What does work mean to you, if I may ask?
Thanks for the question. It does give me an immense amount of purpose, and I've spoken to a few people who have stepped away from work quite early in a career, maybe because they didn't have to work because they sold business, but then really struggled with not having an inbox and not having people to go to work with every day. So for me, there's something very deep within work. It's good for us. It's a good rhythm. It's good to live a life where you're being creative. You're trying to come up with new things every day. You're being sacrificial for others that, you're working with, kind of pouring yourself out at times for those people. And also to have them build you up, whenever you need it as well. So there's an immense amount of purpose and calling in work. And I think I'd really miss this if I wasn't doing what I'm doing now. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm really enjoying the journey that we're on. And
there's something about the sum of the parts, I find, when you're in a team. I think no one really achieves anything in life alone, truly alone, perhaps the odd exception. And always got a real buzz out of knowing that without those other people in your team, the thing that you've achieved collectively, you couldn't have done as individuals. I think that's something that's amazing. Again, in sports and other settings, when you think about it, how many people achieve things that are like really groundbreaking by working together, each bringing their own piece of the jigsaw. That's pretty special. So
there's we're obviously here in Belfast today, and although there'll be listeners across NI, hopefully, and but the motto of Belfast is pro tanto quid retrobamus.
Yes,
I also love languages at school.
I love that.
I did Latin for 2 years.
Snap.
You did it as well?
Yeah, first and second.
So, and again, you think, oh, why would people do that? But actually, I love the origin of language, and Latin is the base of a lot of our, English, French, Spanish, etc.
Yeah.
But pro tanto quid retrobamus actually comes from the Psalms in the Bible, and it's what shall we give in return for so much?
Yeah.
And when I think about work and life in general, it is very much for me as a Christian that I'm out of thankfulness for what God has done through Jesus, that gift which I could never repay. What can I give? And I fail every day to do that. But there's a posture there of I've been given such a great gift, therefore I want to try and to bless others and to pour myself out for other people as well.
It's funny you say that, because I'm not sure if we've talked about this before, but there's two things come to mind. Willie Jack, who owns the
publican,
Duke of York, Harp Bar. On his window panes, he has Pro Tanto Quid Retrobamus, and it's the coat of arms, as you've said, for Belfast. It's the slogan, as it were. And when I had seen that, I'd seen this many years ago, but when I'd seen that, I then thought, wow, that's a really great motto, because even in the strife of life, there's stresses and strains, but you gotta try to be grateful and balance yourself. So actually, would you believe, on my phone, 9 a.m. every day, I've normally started a bit before that, but it's a good center. I've got PTQR, Pro Tanto Quid Retrobamus, every morning. So I get that reminder to say, okay, right, if you're busy, remember to center yourself and be grateful for the fact that, pressure is a privilege and all that. So small world. I don't know. Have we talked about that? I'm not even sure we have.
I don't think we have.
That's a coincidence then.
I noticed it on Hill Street, but I'd never made that connection before. So Neil, I've always enjoyed our conversations, but
likewise.
Just lovely that you've been able to come in today and join the podcast.
Thanks so much.
Wish you every success for all you'll do going forward.
Cheers, Richard.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to Workplus. If today's story gave you fresh perspective or helped you rethink what's possible, leave us a review on your favourite podcast platform or hit like and subscribe. It really does make a big difference. For more stories, resources, and tools to help guide the next generation, visit workplus.app. Until next time.